December 20th, 1943. High above Bremen, Germany, Second Lieutenant Charles Chuck Yeager pulls his P-51 Mustang sharply left as tracer fire rips through the space his cockpit occupied only moments earlier. He's just 19. This is only his 8th combat mission. His hands are trembling so badly he can barely keep hold of the control stick. Behind him, the Messerschmitt Bf 109 chasing his tail is flown by Unterfichter Ludwig Franzisket, an experienced pilot with 11 confirmed victories. Franzisket has spent 2 years stalking Allied airmen. He knows every tactic by heart. He's already lining up for the final lethal shot. Standard procedure is absolute. Stay with your formation, carry out coordinated attacks, never separate from your wingman. The Army Air Forces has invested millions in crafting these principles. Fighter units drill them endlessly. Survival depends on discipline and sticking to the established guidelines. Yeager's fuel gauge is sinking. His ammo counter shows 60 rounds left. The nearest friendly fighter sits 3 miles away. By all logical prediction, he should be dead within half a minute. What Franzisket cannot guess is that Yeager is about to attempt something that breaks every rule ever written for fighter pilots. Something so bold and so unexpected that senior officers will later claim it couldn't have happened. Something that will, by accident, reshape aerial warfare for the next 8 decades. But first, we need to understand why American fighter pilots were being killed in staggering numbers during the winter of 1943. By December of that year, the United States Army Air Forces is facing a disaster threatening the entire bombing strategy over Europe. The losses are staggering. During the Schweinfurt-Regensburg attacks in August 1943, the 8th Air Force loses 60 bombers in a single day, 600 men killed or taken prisoner. In October, another mission to Schweinfurt costs an additional 62 bombers. The loss rate reaches over 20% on long-range operations. At this pace, bomber crews have almost zero chance of completing the required 25 missions. The core issue is range. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings can escort bombers only to Germany's edge, but they lack the fuel to go deep into Reich territory. Once the escorts turn back, Luftwaffe fighters descend on the bombers like predators closing in on injured prey. The apparent answer is simple: build escort fighters capable of long-range missions. North American aviation has produced the P-51 Mustang, capable of reaching Berlin and returning. But another, more dangerous flaw remains. American fighter doctrine itself is deeply outdated. The official tactics manual, written by officers whose experience dates back to the 1920s, prioritizes rigid formations and synchronized team attacks. Pilots are trained to hold precise positions, perform prescribed maneuvers, and never violate formation discipline. Individual decision-making is discouraged. The manual is treated as unquestionable. Meanwhile, German pilots are defeating American fighters with a completely different philosophy. Luftwaffe doctrine, shaped through years of combat across Spain, Poland, France, and the Eastern Front, rewards bold individual action. German aces like Adolf Galland and Günther Rall have perfected the finger-four formation and energy-based combat strategies that give them tremendous advantages. The kill ratio reveals everything. In late 1943, seasoned Luftwaffe pilots are scoring 3 to 4 kills for every aircraft they lose. Some aces, such as Egon Meyer and Walter Nowotny, achieve kill ratios above 10 to 1. American commanders know something is terribly wrong. After-action reports repeatedly show U.S. pilots being outmaneuvered despite flying aircraft with equal or sometimes better performance. But no one can pinpoint the real issue. More formation practice doesn't fix it. Neither does tighter obedience to the manual. Senior leadership agrees on one thing: American pilots simply need improved planes, more training hours, and greater discipline. The doctrine is correct. The failure must lie in execution. That belief is about to be destroyed by a teenager from Hamlin, West Virginia, who barely passed high school. Charles Elwood Yeager is not meant to be here. He grows up in the Appalachian foothills during the Great Depression. His family has very little. His father works long hours in coal mines and natural gas fields. Chuck hunts squirrels and rabbits to help feed everyone at home, developing extraordinary eyesight and precise hand-eye coordination. He can spot a squirrel perched in a tree from 300 yards away. In September 1941, he joins the Army Air Forces as an aircraft mechanic. He has no college education, no influential relatives, and no background in flying. He's assigned to work on P-39 Airacobras in Tonopah, Nevada. By July 1942, the Air Forces face a severe shortage of pilots. The training system simply cannot produce replacements fast enough to match combat losses. The service introduces the Flying Sergeant program, which allows enlisted men to train as pilots without becoming officers. Yeager signs up immediately. His commanders doubt he'll make it. His academic record is weak. His mechanical skills are strong, but flying demands instant judgment and natural spatial awareness, abilities that can't be taught. Most washout candidates come from his same background. He proves them wrong. During training in California and Arizona, Yeager shows instinctive flying talent that astonishes his instructors. His eyesight tests at 20/10, twice as sharp as standard. He can identify enemy planes long before anyone else in formation. He graduates in March 1943 and earns his commission as a flight officer. By November that year, Yeager arrives in England, assigned to the 363rd Fighter Squadron of the 357th Fighter Group. He has accumulated about 270 flight hours. Most of the men in his squadron hold college degrees. Many come from privileged families. Some already had private pilot licenses before joining the service. Yeager is the young man from West Virginia with an Appalachian drawl and none of the social refinement others have. He receives aircraft number 436763, a P-51 Mustang he christens Glamorous Glenn after his girlfriend, Glennis Dickhouse. On December 20th, 1943, he flies his 8th combat mission, escorting bombers to Bremen. This is where everything changes. The critical moment does not come from study or deliberate strategy. It comes from the raw instinct to survive when Ludwig Franzisket's Bf-109 locks onto his tail, and Yeager understands death is seconds away. Franzisket fires a burst, cannon rounds slice past Yeager's canopy. The German ace is closing in, setting up a deflection shot that will rip apart the Mustang's engine. Yeager's training urges him to hold altitude, perform a standard evasive maneuver, and try to meet up with friendly fighters. Everything he's been taught tells him to stay high, where the Mustang excels. Instead, he makes a seemingly mad choice. He rolls the aircraft upside down and pulls the stick back, plunging almost vertically toward the German landscape 7,000 feet below. The airspeed needle passes 400 miles per hour, then 450. The Mustang's wings start to vibrate as the airframe nears its physical limits. The dive is so sharp that Yeager's vision begins to fade from the negative G-forces. It appears suicidal. Everyone knows German fighters can outdive American planes. The Bf-109's fuel-injected engine gives it major advantages in negative G situations. Diving away from a 109 is exactly what pilots are trained not to do, but Yeager isn't thinking about rules. He's reacting like the West Virginia hunter he grew up as, using the terrain, using speed, using any edge he can find. The Mustang's Packard-built Merlin engine, with its two-stage supercharger, behaves differently at high speed than anyone anticipated. As Yeager races toward the ground, the Mustang actually gathers speed faster than the pursuing Bf-109. The airspeed reaches 500 miles per hour. Aerodynamic pressure has nearly frozen the controls. You cannot outdive a Messerschmitt, insists Major Thomas Hayes, the group operations officer. Their fuel-injected engines give them decisive advantages when pulling negative Gs. This is accepted fact. The tactical doctrine is firm. American fighters must hold altitude superiority and conduct coordinated attacks. Diving away from an enemy aircraft is explicitly discouraged in the tactics manual. What Yeager describes goes against the core principles taught at the Air Corps Tactical School. But Yeager is no longer the only one. Over the following 3 weeks, more pilots start reporting similar events. Lieutenant William Wisner makes an almost straight-down dive to escape 2 FW-190s and notices the same effect. At extreme speeds, the Mustang's behavior changes significantly. Captain Don Blakesley, commander of the 4th Fighter Group, and one of the most experienced American pilots in the theater, decides to investigate himself. On January 11, 1944, he takes a P-51B up to 25,000 feet over the English Channel and conducts high-speed dive experiments. The findings are shocking. Below 20,000 feet, in dives beyond 450 miles per hour, the Mustang gains speed faster than any German fighter. The two-stage supercharger designed for high-altitude efficiency produces unexpected benefits during high-speed dives near the ground. Blakesley writes a detailed report and sends it to the 8th Fighter Command headquarters. The reaction is instant and hostile. During a commander's conference on January 18, 1944, Blakesley presents his conclusions. The meeting explodes in disagreement. Senior officers who began flying in the 1920s are now being told that their fundamental assumptions about air combat are wrong, that a young man from West Virginia with a minimal education has discovered something they overlooked. This is dangerous cowboy flying, argues Colonel Hubert Zemke, commander of the 56th Fighter Group. We cannot abandon coordinated tactics in favor of lone wolf stunts. That kind of thinking gets pilots killed. Your data is incorrect, claims another colonel. German fighters have fuel injection. Ours use carburetors. The laws of physics don't magically change. Franziskat dives after him, firing again and again, but his shots fall farther and farther behind. The Mustang is increasing the gap. At 1,500 feet, Yeager yanks back on the stick with all his strength. The G-forces slam him into his seat, and his vision narrows to a tunnel. The Mustang's wings bend upward, pushed nearly to their breaking point. The aircraft levels out at 800 feet, still moving at 480 miles per hour. Franziskat attempts to follow. The Bf-109 manages to recover at about 600 feet, but the maneuver drains his energy. His speed drops to 320 miles per hour. Yeager stabilizes his flight, glances back, and sees something that shouldn't be happening. The German fighter that was moments away from killing him is now trailing behind, slow and exposed. Franziskat is frantically trying to rebuild speed and climb again. Yeager turns back, gains a bit of altitude, and slips in behind the Bf-109. At 400 yards, he fires a 3-second burst. His .50 caliber rounds smash into the German fighter's wing root and fuselage. The Bf-109 tips left, trailing smoke, and spirals downward. Yeager has just performed the first documented high-speed yo-yo maneuver in the history of aerial combat. He doesn't know the name. He doesn't fully grasp the physics behind it. All he knows is that he lived through a situation he shouldn't have. When he lands at RAF Leiston and recounts the incident, his squadron commander reacts instantly. That is absolutely impossible. The 109 beats us in every type of dive. You must have misidentified the aircraft. The intelligence officer's report reflects full doubt. The gun camera footage doesn't confirm much. The dive created too much vibration for the camera to record clearly. Several senior pilots go over Yeager's story and dismiss it as confusion brought on by combat. You cannot outdive a Messerschmitt, insists Major Thomas Hayes, the group operations officer. Their fuel-injected engines give them decisive advantages when pulling negative Gs. This is accepted fact. The tactical doctrine is firm. American fighters must hold altitude superiority and conduct coordinated attacks. Diving away from an enemy aircraft is explicitly discouraged in the tactics manual. What Yeager describes goes against the core principles taught at the Air Corps Tactical School. But Yeager is no longer the only one. Over the following 3 weeks, more pilots start reporting similar events. Lieutenant William Wisner makes an almost straight-down dive to escape 2 FW-190s and notices the same effect. At extreme speeds, the Mustang's behavior changes significantly. Captain Don Blakesley, commander of the 4th Fighter Group, and one of the most experienced American pilots in the theater, decides to investigate himself. On January 11, 1944, he takes a P-51B up to 25,000 feet over the English Channel and conducts high-speed dive experiments. The findings are shocking. Below 20,000 feet, in dives beyond 450 miles per hour, the Mustang gains speed faster than any German fighter. The two-stage supercharger, designed for high-altitude efficiency, produces unexpected benefits during high-speed dives near the ground. Blakesley writes a detailed report and sends it to the 8th Fighter Command headquarters. The reaction is instant and hostile. During a commander's conference on January 18, 1944, Blakesley presents his conclusions. The meeting explodes in disagreement. Senior officers who began flying in the 1920s are now being told that their fundamental assumptions about air combat are wrong, that a young man from West Virginia with a minimal education has discovered something they overlooked. This is dangerous cowboy flying, argues Colonel Hubert Zemke, commander of the 56th Fighter Group. We cannot abandon coordinated tactics in favor of lone wolf stunts. That kind of thinking gets pilots killed. Your data is incorrect, claims another colonel. German fighters have fuel injection. Ours use carburetors. The laws of physics don't magically change. It looks as though the meeting will end with Blakesley's findings quietly shelved and ignored. The resistance is enormous. To rewrite doctrine means admitting the previous doctrine failed. The careers of senior officers depend on the current system. Then Major General William Kepner, head of the 8th Fighter Command, steps in. Kepner is a rule breaker by nature. He learned to fly in 1916. He served in combat during World War I. He has watched far too many young pilots die following tactics that simply don't work. He's willing to overturn orthodoxy if the proof supports doing so. Gentlemen, Kepner says, I don't care if this contradicts everything we learned at tactical school. I care about kill ratios. Captain Blakesley's group has the highest success rate in the entire theater. If his pilots are surviving by breaking the rules, then maybe the rules themselves are wrong. Kepner orders immediate evaluation. Over the next 2 weeks, test pilots push P-51Bs through extreme dive patterns. The data fully confirms Blakesley's conclusions. At speeds beyond 450 miles per hour, the Mustang accelerates faster in a dive than both the BF-109 and the FW-190. On February 3, 1944, Kepner issues a groundbreaking directive. Fighter pilots are officially permitted to use personal initiative and aggressive tactics, including high-speed diving engagements. Formation rigidity is reduced. Pilots are encouraged to exploit the Mustang's exceptional performance at high velocity. The traditional leadership is horrified. But Kepner holds the authority, and he exercises it. Before we follow how this transforms the air war, I need to explain this channel's mission. We bring you stories of innovation and courage that changed the world. Stories history books often overlook. If you value deep research and documentary-level storytelling, please consider subscribing. 92% of you watch without subscribing, but your subscription allows us to devote the hours needed to create these episodes. Thank you. The new tactics are put to use immediately. On February 20, 1944, the 8th Air Force begins Big Week, a massive offensive meant to cripple German aircraft manufacturing. More than 1,000 bombers strike deep inside Germany, escorted by P-51 Mustangs flying with Kepner's new tactical philosophy. March 3, 1944, skies above Berlin. Yeager, now credited with 12 victories, leads a group of 4 Mustangs at 28,000 feet. Below them, 300 B-17s close in on the German capital. Luftwaffe fighters rise to meet them. Bf-10-9s and FW-19s from JG-3 and JG-11, some of Germany's most formidable units. Oberleutnant Heinz Beer an ace with 170 kills, leads 4 Bf-10-9s G6. He spots Yeager's formation and begins a climbing intercept, planning to convert altitude into a diving attack on the bombers. Yeager sees them first. His extraordinary vision gives him 30 seconds of notice. Instead of holding formation and coordinating a defense, he does something that would have been strictly forbidden just 3 months earlier. He rolls inverted and dives, not to flee the Germans, but directly toward them, building massive speed. His wingman, Lieutenant Clarence "Bud" Anderson, follows instantly. The remaining 2 Mustangs stay high as cover. Bear sees the Americans diving and assumes they're running. He adjusts his attack toward the bombers. This is exactly what Yeager intends. At roughly 600 miles per hour, so fast the controls feel like they're fused in place, Yeager pulls up beneath Bear's formation. The Bf-10-9s are cruising at 380 miles per hour, focused entirely on the bombers ahead. They never detect the Mustangs rising beneath them. Yeager fires a 2-second burst at the rearmost 109. The German fighter erupts. Bear brakes sharply left, but Anderson is already waiting, firing. Bear's wingman goes down trailing flames. The last 2 109s dive to escape. Yeager and Anderson don't follow. Instead, they pull a zoom climb, using their huge speed advantage to return to altitude above the bombers. The whole encounter lasts 45 seconds. 2 German fighters destroyed, 0 American losses. The bombers proceed to their target unhindered. This scene plays out again and again. American pilots using the new tactics are achieving kill ratios that had been impossible under the old system. The Luftwaffe, long used to predictable American formations, now faces sudden, aggressive individual attacks from directions they never anticipated. The numbers tell the truth. In January 1944, before the tactical shift, the 8th Fighter Command averages a kill ratio of 2.1 to 1 against the Luftwaffe. By April 1944, after the widespread adoption of energy fighting tactics, the ratio rises to 4.3 to 1. By June, it reaches 6.1 to 1. German pilots notice instantly. Oberleutnant Johannes Steinhoff, a seasoned ace, writes in his diary, "The American fighters have changed. They no longer hold tight formations. They plunge from extreme altitudes at frightening speeds. The fuel-injected engines that once gave us an edge don't matter anymore. Now they're the ones who are faster." In April 1944, General Major Adolf Galland, commander of Germany's fighter arm, reports to Hermann Göring that American Mustang pilots have adopted German energy fighting principles and refined them. Their aircraft outperform ours at high speed, and we're losing seasoned pilots at a pace we can't sustain. The bomber crews notice the shift as well. Their odds of surviving improve drastically. Lieutenant James Howard, a B-17 pilot, writes home saying the fighter escorts have changed. The Americans no longer just shield the bombers. They actively seek out the enemy. And the Germans fear them. On May 8, 1944, Yeager faces one of his toughest adversaries, Hauptmann Georg Peter Eder, an ace with 36 victories, flying the new Bf-109 G10 with improved performance. The engagement unfolds at 24,000 feet over Brunswick. With altitude in his favor, Eder begins a diving attack. Yeager counters immediately, forcing a head-on pass. Both open fire. Both miss. Eder assumes Yeager will climb to recover height. Instead, Yeager rolls over and dives nearly vertically, rapidly gaining speed. Eder follows, trusting his fighter's dive capabilities. At 550 miles per hour, Yeager pulls out and reverses. Eder attempts to match the maneuver, but the G-forces overwhelm him. His vision dims, and he levels out too shallowly. When he finally recovers, Yeager is already on his tail, 400 yards behind. Yeager fires. Eder's aircraft is struck in the engine and wing, smoke streaming from the cowling. Though he manages to limp back to his airfield, the fighter is beyond repair. After the war, Eder writes that the American pilot who damaged his aircraft that day performed maneuvers he had believed impossible, diving away only to appear behind him. Intelligence briefings had insisted such a reversal couldn't occur. They were wrong. By June 1944, the Luftwaffe is collapsing. Veteran pilots are being lost faster than replacements can be trained. Training programs are cut short, producing inexperienced flyers who often die on their first sortie. Meanwhile, the 8th Air Force secures air superiority over Germany. The change in human cost is stark. Bomber losses drop from 20% in October 1943 to under 4% by June 1944. Thousands of airmen survive missions that would have been fatal under the old tactics. After the war, a B-17 pilot named Robert Morgan finds Yeager at an air show. Morgan flew 30 missions over Germany in 1944. He tells Yeager that his crew calculated they should have been shot down on their 8th mission based on 1943 loss rates, yet they flew 22 more. He says they lived because pilots like Yeager learned how to protect them, and that his own children exist thanks to that. The influence of these tactics reaches far beyond World War II. The energy maneuvering principles Yeager discovered, and officers like Blakesley formalized, become the core of modern fighter doctrine. Today, if you want to help support this channel's deep research into overlooked military innovation, consider liking the video and joining our Patreon. Your support makes this work possible. Charles Yeager ends the war with 11.5 confirmed victories. He's shot down once, escapes capture in occupied France with help from the resistance, and returns to battle, flying a total of 64 missions. After the war, he becomes a test pilot. On October 14, 1947, he breaks the sound barrier in the Bell X-1, becoming the first person to fly faster than sound. The skills he learned in combat, energy control, high-speed handling, aggressive maneuvering, prove vital in the new age of supersonic flight. He retires as a brigadier general in 1975. He never claims credit for inventing energy maneuvering tactics. In his autobiography, he simply writes that he was trying to stay alive. If that helped other pilots make it home, he was thankful. But he insists he didn't discover anything. He just reacted. Yet the methods he stumbled upon are still taught today. Every fighter pilot in the U.S. Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps studies the fundamentals of energy fighting during their earliest training. The idea of exchanging altitude for speed, using high-velocity maneuvers to gain positional leverage, and exploiting performance at the very limits of an aircraft, these principles form the backbone of modern aerial combat. The P-51 Mustang, refined around the very tactics Yeager helped bring into practice, becomes the most effective American fighter of the war. North American Aviation builds 15,186 Mustangs. They destroy 4,150 enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat, more than any other Allied fighter. Yeager's own unit, the 357th Fighter Group, earns the highest kill ratio of any American group in the European theater, 5.7 to 1. They shoot down 609 enemy aircraft while losing 106 of their own. Their success stems directly from adopting energy fighting early. Don Blakesley, the commander who championed Yeager's unexpected breakthrough, retires as a colonel with 15.5 victories. He's nominated for the Medal of Honor 3 times, but never receives it. In a 1989 interview, he says the real heroes were young pilots like Yeager, who figured things out even when told they were wrong, and that his only advantage was having enough rank to ensure people paid attention. William Kepner, the general who overrode his staff and authorized the new tactics, retires as a lieutenant general. His February 1944 directive is now studied in military academies as a model of leadership, the courage to challenge entrenched doctrine when the evidence demands change. German pilots who survived the war later spoke with respect about their American adversaries. Johannes Steinhoff, who became a general in the post-war Luftwaffe, wrote in 1977 that by mid-1944, American fighter pilots had surpassed the Germans in skill and aggressiveness. They adapted faster than the Luftwaffe could respond. And Mustang pilots in particular, he said, were extraordinary. The lesson reaches far beyond aviation. Innovation often arrives from unlikely places. A teenager from West Virginia with limited schooling recognized something veteran officers had overlooked. The system almost dismissed his insight because it contradicted accepted doctrine. How many other breakthroughs have been lost for the same reason? Emerging from the wrong person or challenging the wrong assumptions. How many lives might have been saved if organizations were better at recognizing truth regardless of who speaks it? Yeager dies on December 7, 2020, at age 97. His obituary in the New York Times calls him the most famous test pilot of his era. It mentions his supersonic flight. It mentions his combat career. But it doesn't note that he reshaped aerial warfare by doing something everyone believed was impossible. Sometimes the greatest innovations come not from careful planning, but from improvised survival. Not from experts following rigid procedures, but from outsiders who don't know what can't be done. Charles Yeager never intended to rewrite military doctrine. He only wanted to survive his 8th mission. The fact that he did so by breaking every established rule, and in the process saved thousands of lives, is what makes his story extraordinary. So the next time someone insists something is impossible because it contradicts established thinking, remember the 19-year-old from West Virginia who didn't know he wasn't supposed to outdive a Messerschmitt. Sometimes not knowing the rules is exactly what lets you break them.